Hi there. Tell me in the comments which country and city you're from. I sat across from President Andrew Caldwell in his corner office, watching him lean back in his leather chair like he was about to deliver wonderful news. Instead, he gave me that practiced smile, the one he'd perfected over decades of telling people no while making it sound like wisdom. Natalie, I appreciate your enthusiasm, he said, tapping his Mont Blanc pen against the mahogany desk. But right now isn't the ideal moment to discuss compensation adjustments. We need to focus on stability first. My name's Natalie Ford. I'm 31 years old and I live in Columbus, Ohio. For the past 6 years I'd been the backbone of Crestview Analytics, a mid-sized data consulting firm that specialized in predictive models for healthcare providers. I built their entire forecasting platform from scratch. The algorithms running their client dashboards, the machine learning models that predicted patient readmission rates with 94% accuracy, also mine. But sitting in that office, with its view of the downtown skyline and walls covered in achievement plaques that had nothing to do with actual achievement, I realized something fundamental had shifted inside me. I'm not asking for enthusiasm, I said, keeping my voice level. I'm asking for fair compensation based on measurable results. I slid a bound report across his desk. 23 pages of data, charts, performance metrics and revenue impact analysis. This quarter alone, the readmission model I developed generated $2.3 million in new contracts. Last year, my work accounted for 67% of our client retention rate. The Cincinnati hospital network wouldn't have renewed without the custom dashboard I built over 4 consecutive weekends. Andrew glanced at the report but didn't open it. Natalie, you do excellent work. Nobody's questioning that. He smiled again, softer this time, like he was trying to be fatherly. But success here is collaborative. We win together, not individually. I'd heard that line before. It was the same thing he'd said when I asked about a senior analyst promotion 18 months ago. The same deflection when I mentioned my salary hadn't increased in 3 years while the company's revenue had doubled. Behind Andrew, through the glass wall of the conference room, I could see Veronica Hayes and Paul Dennison sitting at the table. Veronica was VP of Client Relations, a title she'd earned by being Andrew's college roommate's daughter. Paul headed business development, which mostly meant he played golf with hospital administrators and took credit for deals I'd modeled the projections for. Neither of them had looked at my report either. I understand collaboration, I said. But when one person builds the engine that runs the whole operation, that's not collaboration. That's exploitation with better branding. The room went quiet. Veronica stopped clicking her pen. Paul shifted in his seat. Andrew's smile finally cracked. That's a serious accusation, he said carefully. It's an observation, I replied. One I've been making for 3 years. I reached into my bag and pulled out a sealed envelope. Plain white, standard business size, with Andrew's name printed on the front in simple black ink. I placed it in the center of his desk. What's this? He asked. My resignation, I said. Effective 2 weeks from today. Andrew stared at the envelope like it might explode. Veronica stood up. Natalie, let's not be hasty. I'm not being hasty, I said, cutting her off. I've been patient for 6 years. There's a difference. I stood, picked up my laptop bag and pushed my chair back under the table with deliberate care. Thank you for your time. Then I walked out. No slamming doors. No dramatic speeches. Just the sound of my heels clicking across the tile floor and the glass door closing softly behind me. By the time I reached my car in the parking garage, my hands were shaking, not from fear but from the pure adrenaline of finally doing what I should have done years ago. I'd been holding that envelope for 2 months. Not because I was scared but because part of me kept hoping they'd prove me wrong. That someone would notice. That the work would speak for itself. But work never speaks. People have to speak for it, and I was done waiting for someone else to say what I'd been screaming silently for years. I've always been a builder. The kind of kid who took apart her grandmother's radio at 9 just to see how the circuits worked. By 12, I was writing basic programs on an old desktop my uncle gave me. Simple stuff, calculators, text-based adventure games, a digital notebook that color-coded entries by mood. I didn't have formal training. Just curiosity, stubbornness, and a refusal to accept, I don't know, as a final answer. College wasn't some lifelong dream. I went because I knew I needed structure to get better. So I enrolled in a data science program at Ohio State, Took night classes while working full-time as a medical records clerk at Riverside General Hospital. My sleep schedule was a disaster. My GPA was nearly perfect, and I stayed perpetually broke. But I graduated with a job offer already in hand, junior data analyst at Crestview Analytics. The company was small back then. 20 employees, 1 floor in a converted office building near the Short North Arts District. They specialized in healthcare consulting, helping hospitals and clinics make sense of patient data to reduce costs and improve outcomes. When I started, their analytics platform was a patchwork of Excel macros and outdated SQL databases held together with prayer and desperation. The senior analyst, a guy named Ethan, spent most of his time explaining why things couldn't be done rather than figuring out how to do them. It had to work. I rebuilt their data pipeline from the ground up. Migrated everything to a cloud-based system, wrote custom scripts to automate reporting, created visualization tools that actually made sense to non-technical clients. When Ethan left 6 months later to join a startup in Austin, I inherited his role quietly. No title change. No salary adjustment. Just twice the workload and a sticky note on my desk that said, "Handle it." I handled it. 2 years in, I developed the predictive readmission model, the one that would eventually become Crestview's flagship product. Hospital readmissions are expensive. When a patient gets discharged and ends up back in the ER within 30 days, it costs the hospital tens of thousands of dollars and triggers penalties from Medicare. My model analyzed patient demographics, medical history, social factors, medication adherence patterns, even transportation access and food security data. It predicted with 94% accuracy which patients were high risk for readmission, allowing hospitals to intervene early with follow-up care, home visits, or social services. It was groundbreaking work. The kind of thing that gets written up in healthcare journals and presented at conferences. Crestview sold it to 17 hospital systems in the first year alone. I got a $2,000 bonus and a company-wide email from Andrew thanking the team for their innovative spirit. I didn't quit then. I should have, but I told myself it was about the work. About solving problems that actually mattered. Patients getting better care because of something I built. That meant something. They fed off that. Every time a client had a technical issue, guess who handled it? Every time a potential contract needed a custom demo, guess who built it? Every time a new hire needed training on the platform, guess who spent hours walking them through it? They never had to ask. I just kept showing up. The worst moment came during the Cincinnati expansion deal. We'd been courting Trinity Health Network, a massive regional system with 11 hospitals and 40-plus clinics. If we landed them, it would be our biggest contract ever. A week before the final presentation, the demo environment crashed. Not a small glitch, a total system failure. The client dashboard wouldn't load. The predictive models were throwing error codes. Nobody could figure out why. Andrew called me at midnight on a Tuesday. "Natalie, we need you. You're the only one who understands the architecture well enough to trace this." I was already logged in, tunneling through server logs and tracking down the corrupted data batch that had triggered the cascade failure. I didn't sleep. Pulled a 36-hour sprint, rewrote the data validation protocols, stress-tested the entire system against every edge case I could imagine, and deployed the fix at 4 a.m. the morning of the presentation. The demo ran flawlessly. Trinity signed a 3-year contract worth $4.8 million. Andrew sent a company-wide email celebrating the team effort and crediting Paul's relationship-building skills for closing the deal. My name wasn't mentioned once. You know what I did? I went back to work. Because somewhere in my head I still believed that if I kept delivering, if I kept being indispensable, eventually someone would see it. But in that meeting, watching Andrew dismiss my work with corporate platitudes while Veronica and Paul sat there nodding like trained seals, I finally understood the truth. They'd never see me as anything but convenient. So I stopped waiting. The morning after I submitted my resignation, I updated my LinkedIn profile. I didn't make a big announcement. Just quietly changed my headline to Senior Data Scientist, Healthcare Analytics, Open to Opportunities, and let the algorithm do its work. Within 2 days, I had 7 messages from recruiters. Within a week, I had 3 interview requests. The first offer came from a startup in Boston. High energy, equity options, unlimited PTO, and a founding team fresh out of an accelerator program. They wanted me to lead their data science division and help them build a platform for mental health clinics. Good opportunity. Great people. Terrible timing. I turned them down. The second offer came from a pharmaceutical company in Chicago. Big salary, comprehensive benefits, a massive team and enough bureaucracy to drown in. I turned that down too. I told myself I needed to be strategic, that I should wait for the right fit. But really, I was still carrying some residual guilt about leaving Crestview, like I owed them something after 6 years. I didn't owe them anything. On day 9 of my 2-week notice period, I got a message on LinkedIn from someone I didn't recognize. Natalie, I've been following your work for a while. I'd love to discuss an opportunity we're developing. Would you be open to a conversation? Dr. Elliot Brennan, Chief Innovation Officer, National Health Standards Bureau. I had to read it twice. NHSB wasn't just another analytics firm. They were the regulatory body that set benchmarks for healthcare quality nationwide. If a hospital wanted federal funding, they had to meet NHSB standards. If a health tech company wanted credibility, they needed NHSB certification. I replied within an hour. 2 days later, Dr. Brennan and I were on a video call. He didn't waste time with small talk. I want to talk about your readmission model, he said, pulling up a technical paper on his screen. Specifically, the risk stratification algorithm you published in the Journal of Healthcare Informatics 3 years ago. I blinked. You read that? I cited it in a policy recommendation, he said. Your approach to integrating social determinants into clinical predictions was years ahead of the field. Most of your competitors are still trying to catch up. Nobody at Crestview had ever mentioned that paper. I'd published it on my own time, using anonymized data and citing the company appropriately. Andrew had barely acknowledged it. We're building a new division, Dr. Brennan continued. Algorithmic integrity and standards. We need someone to define what good looks like before companies even submit for certification. Not just reviewing existing models, setting the benchmarks they'll be judged against. You're asking me to write the rulebook, I said slowly. I'm asking you to raise the bar so high that mediocrity can't fake its way over it. That night, Dr. Brennan flew to Columbus. We met at a quiet restaurant near German Village, away from downtown and Crestview's usual haunts. He slid a formal offer letter across the table before we even ordered. Director of Algorithmic Standards. Full benefits. Your own team. Budget autonomy. You won't just enforce quality, he said. You'll define it. And if companies want our certification, they'll have to meet your standards. I stared at the document, reading the same lines over and over, waiting for the catch. There wasn't one. I need 2 weeks, I said. Not for them, for me. I want to document everything properly so nobody else gets stuck cleaning up my mess. Dr. Brennan nodded. Do what you need. We'll see you in 2 weeks. As I walked to my car, he called after me. Natalie. I turned. You're not wrong for wanting recognition, he said. You're just used to working for people who profit from your silence. I didn't respond. I just got in my car and sat there for 10 minutes, hands gripping the steering wheel, trying to process what had just happened. This wasn't about money anymore. It wasn't even about titles. It was about finally having the authority to make sure what happened to me couldn't happen to someone else. I walked into Crestview the next morning like nothing had changed. Clocked in at 8:30. Made coffee in the break room. Fired up my workstation and opened the project management system. Nobody said a word. Not at first. I spent the entire day organizing documentation. Every algorithm, every data pipeline, every custom integration I'd built over 6 years. I wrote it all down. Step-by-step guides. Plain language explanations. Video tutorials for the junior analysts who'd never bothered to learn the system. I wasn't going to give them the satisfaction of chaos. By the 3rd day, the silence broke. First, it was an email from HR asking me to schedule an exit interview. Then 3 missed calls from Andrew. Then a calendar invite from Veronica marked urgent with no agenda. I ignored all of it and kept working. At 2:17 p.m. on day 4, Veronica appeared at my desk. Hey Natalie, she said, smiling like we were friends. Do you have a minute? I glanced at the clock. For what? Just a quick chat. Andrew wants to see you. Does he? It wasn't a question. She nodded, her smile faltering slightly. Yeah. Conference room B. I saved my work, locked my computer and followed her down the hall. Andrew was already waiting. So was Paul. Both of them sitting on the same side of the table like they'd planned this. Natalie, thanks for coming, Andrew said, gesturing to the empty chair across from them. Please sit. I stayed standing. What do you need? He cleared his throat. We've been reviewing your resignation. First, I want to say this caught us completely off guard. Did it? I said flatly. Yes, Veronica chimed in. We had no idea you were unhappy. I almost laughed. I told you. Multiple times. You weren't listening. Paul leaned forward, folding his hands on the table. Look, let's cut to the chase. We want to make this right. How? I asked. Andrew smiled. We're prepared to offer you a 30% raise effective immediately, plus a promotion, senior data architect, and we'll add you to the executive strategy committee. I raised an eyebrow. You don't even know what my new offer is. Doesn't matter, Andrew said quickly. We'll match it. Hell, we'll beat it. How I matter, I said quietly. The room went still. Not because my work changed. Not because you suddenly realized what I've been telling you for years. I matter now because replacing me will cost you more than keeping me ever did. Andrew opened his mouth, but I kept going. I trained every analyst who walked through that door. I built the platform that runs this entire company. I fixed the Trinity demo at midnight while you slept, and I didn't see a single dollar from that contract. But now that I'm leaving, suddenly I'm valuable. Veronica stood up. Natalie, we're trying to show we care. You had 6 years to show that, I said. You only care now because I'm walking away. Paul tried next. Can't we just take a week? Cool off, talk this through. I shook my head. I already signed my offer. I start in 2 weeks. Where? Andrew asked, an edge of panic creeping into his voice. I smiled. National Health Standards Bureau. His face went pale. I'm going to be writing the certification standards for healthcare analytics platforms, I continued. The benchmarks every company in this industry, including yours, will have to meet. Veronica sat back down slowly. Good luck, I said. Then I walked out, leaving the door open behind me. The rest of my 2 weeks were surreal. Suddenly, everyone wanted to talk to me. Analysts who'd ignored my code reviews for months were stopping by my desk with questions. Engineers I'd trained years ago were asking if I wanted to grab lunch. Even Paul sent me a message asking if we could connect before you go. I stayed polite, professional, focused. Let them scramble. On my last morning, I came in early, cleared out my desk, backed up my personal files, wiped my workstation, and boxed up the few things I'd kept there. A coffee mug, a succulent plant, a framed photo of my dog. At 10 a.m., I walked to HR and handed in my access badge. The woman at the desk, Lydia, smiled too wide. You sure we can't change your mind? Completely sure, I said. As I turned to leave, Andrew was standing in the hallway. Natalie, he said, slightly out of breath. Got a second? I stopped. One. Where are you headed next? He asked, trying to sound casual. I already told you. NSB. He nodded slowly, his jaw tight. Big move. Congratulations. Thanks. Listen, he said, lowering his voice. No hard feelings, right? Who knows what the future holds? I looked at him for a long moment. Take care, Andrew. Then I walked out the front door for the last time. No cake. No party. No farewell speech. Just fresh air, my car keys in my hand, and the sound of the door locking behind me. I didn't take another work call for 3 weeks. Drove down to North Carolina. Rented a cabin in the mountains near Asheville. Hiked until my legs ached. Read books with no practical purpose. Slept without setting an alarm. For the first time in 6 years, I didn't dream about error logs or system crashes. I just rested. By the time I got back to Columbus, I didn't miss Crestview at all. Not the office. Not the meetings. Not the late-night panic calls. My first day at NSB, there was a badge waiting for me at security with my name printed clearly. Dr. Natalie Ford, Director of Algorithmic Standards. Dr. Brennan met me in the lobby and walked me upstairs to my office. Not a cubicle. Not a shared workspace. An actual office. With walls, a door, and a window overlooking the atrium. Inside, a team of 4 was already waiting. 2 data scientists, a policy analyst, and a regulatory specialist. Welcome to Algorithmic Standards, Dr. Brennan said. You set the rules now. The work was exactly what he'd described. My job was to overhaul how healthcare analytics platforms got certified. No more rubber stamping flashy demos. We were building precision standards that actually measured quality, accuracy, and fairness. We started with the fundamentals: model transparency, data integrity, bias testing, outcome validation. Within 3 weeks, I'd pulled together every flaw I'd spent years patching at Crestview and turned them into formal rejection criteria. If your model couldn't explain its predictions, instant fail. If your training data wasn't demographically representative, fail. If your accuracy metrics didn't hold up across different patient populations, fail. I wasn't here to play nice. By week 8, we'd finalized the new standards and published them publicly. Some companies adapted quickly. A few reached out for guidance and got ahead of it. Others struggled. Crestview was one of them. I didn't audit them personally. NHSB's conflict of interest policy was ironclad. But I saw the preliminary reports. Their readmission model, the one I'd built, had been modified after I left. They'd tried to improve it by adding features they didn't understand. Now it was failing basic validation tests. Prediction accuracy had dropped to 81%. Bias metrics were flagged in 3 categories. The documentation was incomplete. Half the infrastructure I'd warned them to upgrade years ago was still running on outdated servers. I didn't gloat. I didn't text anyone. I just kept working. The night the new standards went live, I got a call from a number I hadn't saved. I let it ring through to voicemail. Then it rang again. I picked up. Natalie. It was Ethan. My old coworker from 6 years ago. Hey, I said, leaning back in my chair. You saw the release, right? He asked, voice tight. What about it? It looks like half our platform is flagged as non-compliant. We've got clients holding contracts pending recertification. I stayed quiet. You had to know this was coming, he added, but it didn't sound like an accusation. More like someone realizing the consequences too late. I didn't write the standards alone, I said. They were reviewed by external experts, legal teams, and policy advisors. But they came from you. He wasn't wrong. I hadn't engineered Crestview's failure. I just defined what good actually looked like, and they didn't measure up. I'm not involved in your audit, I told him. And even if I were, the standards are public now. You either meet them or you don't. There was a long pause. You built this, he said quietly. I looked out my office window at the NHSB atrium, where analysts were testing submissions from companies that actually cared about quality. Yeah, I said. I did. The next morning, a request appeared in the audit queue. Crestview Analytics. Expedited review requested. I wasn't assigned to the case. Protocol wouldn't allow it. But as a department director, I had access to all active audits. I opened the file. It was worse than I'd expected. The model architecture had been hacked apart. Features I'd carefully balanced were now weighted incorrectly. The training data pipeline I'd built had been replaced with something faster but far less rigorous. They'd prioritized speed over accuracy. The validation protocols I'd implemented? Gone. Replaced with automated tests that checked surface-level metrics but missed deeper issues. They'd also hard-coded fallback predictions, meaning if the model couldn't calculate a risk score, it just guessed based on historical averages. That wasn't machine learning. That was statistical roulette. The hardware specs hadn't been upgraded either. Same memory limitations. Same processing bottlenecks. They hadn't evolved. They'd regressed. Later that afternoon my phone rang. I stared at the screen for 3 rings before answering. Natalie, he said, skipping any greeting. I just got the preliminary audit results. What the hell is this? It's NHSB's certification process, I said calmly. The one every company agrees to when they apply. This is personal, he snapped. You designed these standards to shut us out. All calls are recorded, Andrew, I reminded him. If you have concerns about our protocols, you can file a formal dispute. He exhaled sharply. You know we can't meet these benchmarks. Then improve your platform. In 6 months. That's impossible. It's not impossible, I said. I built a compliant system in less time than that. With fewer resources. While you paid me a quarter of what I was worth. Silence. Then he hung up. I didn't tell anyone about the call. Didn't need to. 3 weeks later the final ruling came down. Crestview Analytics. Provisionally certified. They weren't banned. but they couldn't advertise full NHSB approval. Couldn't sign new contracts without disclosing their provisional status. And they had 6 months to meet baseline standards or lose certification entirely. The fallout started immediately. One hospital system pulled their contract the next day. A clinic network in Michigan paused all Crestview purchases. Another in Pennsylvania announced they were switching to a competitor with full certification. Andrew's worst fear had come true: transparency. The more clients read the standards, the more they realized what Crestview had been selling wasn't quality. It was luck held together with duct tape and my old code. Meanwhile, I showed up to work every day like clockwork. Reviewed new audit submissions. Refined testing protocols. Helped my team build automated validation tools. I didn't bring up Crestview. Didn't need to. They'd done this to themselves. 2 months later, I walked into the Midwest Healthcare Innovation Summit with a badge that read Dr. Natalie Ford, NSB, Director of Algorithmic Standards. The keynote hall was packed. Executives, engineers, policymakers, investors, all crammed into rows of chairs, half of them pretending they weren't watching me reset the rules of the industry. My presentation was titled Accountability in Algorithm Design, a framework for truth. The slides were clean. No fluff. Just data. I laid out the new reality. From now on, any company applying for NHSB certification had to include formal documentation of innovation origin, code authorship, model development history, contribution logs with timestamps. If you couldn't prove where your ideas came from, or worse if you took credit for someone else's work, you didn't pass. This wasn't just about technical benchmarks anymore. This was about recognition, about honesty, about rebuilding trust. In the third row I spotted them. Andrew, Veronica, Paul, sitting there like they belonged, but with expressions that betrayed them. Tight smiles, crossed arms, eyes that wouldn't meet the stage. I didn't flinch. Kept going. This isn't about punishment, I said into the microphone. It's about making sure the people who build things get the credit they've earned. Innovation has value, but only if we stop letting companies bury the people who create it. The applause started before I even finished the sentence. After the talk, I stepped off the stage and headed for the exit corridor. I didn't make it 10 feet. Natalie. Paul. Freddy. Smiling too hard. Hey, fantastic presentation. Really powerful stuff. I raised an eyebrow. You need something? Not need, he said quickly. Opportunity. Crestview's going through a transition obviously, and we're looking at bringing in outside consultants. You'd be perfect. I stared at him. You're serious? We'd keep it quiet. Advisory only. You wouldn't be directly involved in audits. That's still a conflict of interest, Paul. He started to backpedal, but I just walked past him. 30 seconds later, Veronica was in my path. Natalie, she said, voice calm but strained. I'm glad I caught you. I stopped. Didn't smile. We know where things stand, she continued. But I want to be honest. We have over 300 employees depending on this company. If we can't recover, he let that hang. That's not my problem, I said. You built a system that refused to evolve. Now it's collapsing. That's on you. But you could help fix it, she said quietly. You know the system. People trust you now. That's exactly why I can't help you. She nodded slowly, her shoulders sagging, and walked away. I turned toward the side exit. Andrew was waiting in the hallway. He stepped in front of me. Before you say anything, just listen. I crossed my arms. We want to offer you full control, he said. Rebuild the division. Pick your team. Set the budget. Hell, name the department after yourself if you want. Just name your price. I tilted my head. You should be grateful I even let you speak to me. Then I walked right past him. 2 days after the summit, a formal complaint landed on Dr. Brennan's desk. Filed by Crestview Analytics. Allegations, conflict of interest, audit bias, standards manipulation. They claimed I'd used insider knowledge to design standards Crestview couldn't meet. That I'd rigged the system out of personal revenge. I didn't panic. I activated Protocol 19, our internal transparency procedure. By noon, my team had pulled every document tied to the standards development process. Over 3,000 pages of tracked revisions, meeting notes, external reviews, and legal sign-offs. We compiled 140 training videos I'd recorded during development. Screen captures, walkthroughs, side-by-side comparisons showing how the standards addressed industry-wide gaps, not company-specific weaknesses. My name was on the project, but so were 42 others. The hearing happened 2 weeks later over video conference. An external review panel. No internal bias. No favoritism. Andrew logged in first, looking exhausted. Veronica followed. Then Paul and a consultant I didn't recognize. They made their case. The standards were designed with insider knowledge. The timeline is suspicious. Natalie left and immediately created rules we can't meet. Then the panel opened our documentation. Every claim unraveled in minutes. The standards had been reviewed 7 times by independent committees before I even finalized the draft framework. There was a 6-week public comment period. Crestview had never submitted feedback. Then came the breaking point. Their consultant admitted on record that Crestview had lost critical validation files after I left. We didn't realize until after the update cycle, he stammered. One panelist leaned forward. So you submitted a modified platform for certification without verifying it met your own internal benchmarks. He went pale. That appears to be correct. It was over. The panel ruled. No conflict of interest. No bias. Complaint dismissed. I didn't smile. Just clicked leave meeting and got back to work. But the fallout didn't stop. 3 days later, Crestview's board launched an internal investigation. Allegations of mismanagement. Evidence tampering. Peer mishandling. By Friday, Andrew was on leave. Veronica. Paul had already resigned. Their stock dropped 18% in 1 week. Meanwhile, I finalized the next version of our public standards and approved a new certification fast-track program for startups. No interviews. No press tour. Just work. They came after me with a complaint. I handed them a mirror. The knock on my door was soft. Tentative. I looked up. Veronica. No folder. No fake smile. Just tired eyes and slumped shoulders. Got a minute? She asked. I nodded. Sure. She stepped inside. Stayed standing. We've lost 6 clients. 2 more are asking about early termination clauses. I waited. She took a breath. We're not here to fight anymore. I'm asking, what would it take to rebuild? I slid a printed document across my desk. Start with this, I said. The Attribution and Accountability Framework. Publicly recognize everyone who built what you've been selling. Retroactively. Accurately. She picked it up, scanned the first page. Her eyes stopped on the key line. Individual contributions must be named, documented, and credited in all product materials and internal records. And the list, she asked quietly. Already compiled, I said. 22 innovations Crestview marketed as proprietary were mine. Put my name on them. Then do the same for everyone else you ignored. She nodded slowly. Okay. 1 month later, Crestview became the 6th company to adopt the NHSB Attribution and Ethics Program. My name led the announcement. I didn't gloat. Just signed the approval and moved on. 1 year later, I stood behind a microphone again. Same summit. Bigger room. I was presenting the final ratified version of the attribution framework, now adopted by 43 organizations nationwide. As I finished, someone in the back raised their hand. Does this framework prioritize individual contributors over corporate teams? I smiled. It prioritizes truth, I said. If a company genuinely builds things together, this framework will reflect that. But if one person carried the whole operation while everyone else took credit, this framework will reflect that too. The applause was louder this time. But I wasn't thinking about the noise. I was thinking about every junior analyst who'd been told their work was a team effort. Every developer who never got their name on a patent. Every engineer who fixed the impossible bug at 3 a.m. and watched someone else get promoted for it. This system wouldn't fix everything. But it made it harder to bury the people who actually built. And that was enough. 6 months after the framework rollout, I got an email from someone I'd never met. Subject: thank you. Hi Dr. Ford. You don't know me. My name is Rachel and I'm a data scientist at a healthcare startup in Portland. Last year, my team built a diagnostic model for early sepsis detection. When we submitted it to NHSB for certification, we had to use your attribution framework. My manager tried to list himself as the lead researcher. But because of your standards, we had to provide commit logs, code ownership records and project timelines. The truth came out.